Thanks for joining me in conversations with leaders who are engaging with their feelings as a leadership tool for both inspiration and motivation. Today I'm speaking with Lee Krevat, who is a leader in the energy sector where he's evangelized the transformation of the electrical energy grid in order to accommodate the transition to electric vehicles. And now for the conversation. Lee Krevat joins me today for a conversation about leadership and climate. Lee has over 3 decades experience working in energy and technology. Notably, he served as director and founder of the Smart Grid organization at San Diego Gas and Electric, evangelizing grid modernization, especially to support charging of electric vehicles. He serves on a number of boards and has a great purview of where we are in the energy transition away from fossil fuels. Lee is also the host of the Climate Champions podcast, and I'm very grateful he had me on there for a conversation, and I'm equally grateful to have him here today. Welcome, Lee.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Great. Well, it's great to have you. And I really enjoyed our conversation, and I encourage everybody to check out your Climate Champions podcast. It's really great. It's a great podcast, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share thoughts about the climate there, and this came up in our conversation too, about how we're feeling, and so I was hoping that you could start off and share with this audience how you're feeling now about the climate crisis.
Well, it's interesting you should ask how I'm feeling now, because certainly I've had a long, many-year journey, many-decade journey with regards to climate change and how I have felt. Right now, to be honest, I feel a mixture almost all the time, and it's really based on what's going on in the news lately or based on my latest podcast and who I interviewed and what they had to say. Sometimes I have people that are very abreast of the facts and they can speak about it very clearly from a scientific perspective on the modeling and what is going on with the weather impacts and other impacts. And when they go into those details, I do get very nervous. I do get scared again, even though I've been through it so many times before. Every time I think about the task ahead of the human race, it does make me scared again. I don't really get mad because I think we're all to blame. So there's nobody to get mad at, really. It's the way it is, and we have to do something about it. Other times I'm very optimistic and very excited, very happy because, first of all, I've interviewed now 120 people for the climatechampions.com podcast. And I got a little plug in there.
Yeah, no. It's a really great show, and yeah, please plug away.
Just the fact that there are so many people that want to be on the show and that are out there to be on the show. I also did a call this morning, Green Tech Talks, a buddy of mine, Les Mood, on LinkedIn, hosts that. We had over 100 people on that, and just so many people that want to do something. And then as I interview people, there are so many things that they are doing that will really help and gives us a chance. So every time I'm opened up to a new fantastic technology, or sometimes it's not a technology, just a process, a methodology like you have, it gives me renewed hope. So I kind of go in between a feeling of dread about what's going to happen and a feeling that we can do something about it.
Right. Well, I mean, that's great. And I think a lot of people are in the climate space are having, similar, different feelings that they're rolling through. And it's really interesting how you bring up hope and I guess anxiety or some kind of fear that you're feeling, and you're kind of going back and forth between those two. Sometimes I've heard people say that they're feeling sadness or grief, and sometimes I hear that people are are frustrated or angry, so it's really interesting how, each of us does have kind of a core that can, one, serve to wake us up, but also serve to energize us and move to action and give us hope. So I mean that's fantastic. And so how are these feelings now influencing your current leadership and your actions?
It's interesting that you mentioned anger. I just want to address that. For
Yeah.
me, it's hard to get angry about it because I've been involved with so many aspects of the space. And I understand that most of the people, even the people that are doing the bulk of the damage, I guess some of them are bad people, but for the most part, they have jobs, they're trying to feed their families, and they have 1,000 excuses, and it's hard for them because they've been raised in a way that they appreciate money and getting promotions. It's very difficult for them to take action against that, basically get fired or quit. It's
Mhm.
just a difficult thing. And I know that personally because you asked, like, what am I doing about it as a leader? And 4 years ago, I left a very high paying job to be out on my own. I decided, I got this from another guy who was on my podcast, Marco Evangelisti, his name was, I believe. And he said he developed a sense of enough. And so I developed a sense of enough and said, okay, I need to do something about this problem. I was very lucky to be involved with Smart Grid and to be involved with Semper Renewables, where I actually launched our distributed renewable energy campaign and efforts in that space. So I got to be involved with doing what I consider to be the right thing, to do something about the problem. But I did, I think the day it was announced that we were selling Semper Renewables, which is where I worked, I decided that the company wasn't for me. And that's when I decided to leave and go out on my own. And what I do now, it's funny, when I went out on my own initially, it was very easy to get distracted with consulting deals that weren't really focused on climate change mitigation, which is the reason I left. But it took me about 6 months, maybe a year, to unwind any of those consulting agreements and really just focus on advising companies that are really trying to make a difference. And that's what I do every day. And it's interesting, I have a list of to-dos and I do filter them and make sure I'm doing this to help. And I don't want to be doing it to make money anymore. I've had that kind of a life. I just want to be part of the solution. And you talk about your numbers, and 7 is a communicator, and I do feel that that is something I can do, and that's why I focus as much as I can on communicating, not only through a podcast, but sitting on these advisory boards and boards of these companies. I introduce them to venture capital. I introduce them to each other. I find customers for them if I can. I give them advice, whatever I can do to help.
Right. Yeah, and so you're bringing up a number of really fascinating points. One is, how you set priorities, and then also you mentioned we had a conversation about Enneagram, and we're thinking that maybe you're an Enneagram type 7. Certainly, you've migrated to a role that is very aligned with being an Enneagram type 7. So I kind of want to just explore both of those things a little bit. And so if you feel comfortable, I would love to hear how you establish your priorities in terms of where you want to focus your energy in your consulting practice.
That's a good question because privatization has never been a strong suit of mine. Even when I was pretty high up in management, I still found I wanted to say yes to everybody. And I feel like for the most part, I'm still doing that. That's why I have my little to-do list and I put stars next to the things I just have to get done. And those priorities, some things are just urgent because they're due today, like doing this discussion. We agreed to do it, so I'm going to deliver on that. But I think number one for me is getting the word out wherever I can. And I like doing content, I guess. So I'm attracted to that. So it's easier for me to do that. The behind the scenes things are harder for me to do, like the administration work of that. So sometimes it takes me a lot longer to edit a podcast episode than actually record it initially, for example. And the other thing I really like to do, and I consider a top priority, is if any of the companies that I have any relationship with at all need me to help, then I put that at the top of the queue.
Right. Well, it's really interesting, and it's a nice segue to Enneagram Type 7, because Enneagram Type 7s love doing new, exciting stuff all the time. And opportunities to connect with people are some of the most exciting things for the seven. So I can see how you prioritize those, and the thought of doing back office detailed grudge work is like, oh, don't want to do that. So
But let me just say, I give tons of credit to people that do that, and I wish, and I've
exactly.
tried to get stronger at it. I used to think that I was very valuable as an employee because I had a lot of ideas all the time, a lot of ideas. But then I learned that ideas that aren't done, that you don't have the wherewithal to follow up on and actually get them done, they don't really count for much, you know? So it's you have to be more well-rounded than that. You not only need the idea, but you have to have the drive to take it to full completion.
Right, right. Yeah. And sevens are great at, I call them the honeybees of the Enneagram, because they buzz around and they pick up ideas everywhere like pollen, and then bring it back and work with the hive to make honey. So it seems like you're very good at that, and that's why sevens will often partner with other people who complement them on the things that they don't like to do, so they can focus on the things they love to do. And that's true for everybody, I think.
I'll give a plug to this smart grid team that I led back at San Diego Gas and Electric that you talked about, because my team was so awesome and balanced. We didn't do an Enneagram test, so we don't know, but each of them seemed to have such amazing skills. It was one of the best teams I've ever been on, and I've been on some great teams. But one thing I really liked is they let me go off and do what I needed to do, to think, to mix ideas together and to create. And they made real things happen on the back end. So without them, I was nothing.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, it takes a team. Hey, and I also just want to plug the importance of what you're doing, because type sevens are great communicators, and they're great at getting ideas out into the community. And that is so important for the climate movement. So I'm very appreciative of everything that you're doing, and that very optimistic, hopeful view that you give us as you are, helping us understand where we are. So thank you so much for that.
Wow, you're very welcome. And it is really my pleasure. It's what I feel like I was born to do. It's putting everything, my entire career together to finally do, I feel, what I was meant to do.
Oh, that is perfect. Perfect. Purpose combined with all of your talents, and away you go, right?
Well, that's why I do an improvised rap at the end of my interviews, like I did with you, which I know floored you, because I made it up right there on
Yes,
the fly,
it was great.
without even pausing to think, pretty much. And that just combines another one of my passions. I try to put them all together.
Yes, yeah, that is great. So now, what advice would you give to leaders and aspiring leaders, maybe, young adults who are now, at outset of their career and wanting to do something to address the climate crisis, and they're having these feelings. So what would you do? What advice would you give to anybody who's starting to have strong feelings about the climate crisis?
Well, for me, it took a long time in my career to get more than a single win, whatever you call it, a single bottom line win. I don't know the proper term for it, but I was focused on promotion and money. And I got into whatever I did. Whatever I did, I saw new ideas how to do it, and I enjoyed it. So it gave me personal satisfaction. It took me a while in my career to realize I won't get into, I have a long story about it, but when I realized, wow, you can do more than make money and get promotions, you can actually help the world. And once I realized that, boy, it's hard not to do it because
Right.
it's important. So it was a journey for me to do it more with more and more of my time and worry less about the financial aspects of what I do. That being said, I think for a lot of people, they have to earn money.
Right.
They don't have enough yet.
Right.
And so I think it's important that they find that balance, make what you need to live,
Yeah.
and make sure that you're satisfied with what you do. But if you can follow your passion and make a difference in the world, there's nothing like that, because then you don't mind working. It never feels like work. It always feels like you're doing what you should be doing in the world. And I'll tell you, I have two daughters, both incredibly wonderful. Both became computer scientists like myself, and both are trying to find a way, both of them, how do they do that in a way that helps the world? It isn't enough, that they're just making a good living. And I'm so proud of them both.
Yeah, yeah, that is great. And I really like how your emphasis on the word enough. We both are living in the United States, and oftentimes it's a culture that glorifies money and glorifies profits, and we become enculturated into believing that oh, that's what we should be working on, is enriching ourselves. And you've come to this realization that there are that's not the end goal. There are other ways of living a life where you have enough, and that you can have build into purpose, with other activities that are broader than just pursuing money, and that will help all of us at the end of the day create a more habitable environment, and help sustain humanity. And so I really just so appreciate that perspective that you have.
But I really do understand people need to earn a living. So everybody
Yes.
can't just say, I'm not doing my job. And another thing that's kind of interesting is some people will say that I retired. And I don't even know what that word means, because as long as I have energy, what's the point of just playing golf? I mean, I do know people that enjoy that, and that's fine. But I feel like I'm here for a reason. So I don't feel that I'll retire while I can make a difference in the world.
Right, right. So, well, thank you so much, Lee. I just love all of these ideas that you've shared. I love that you're on your journey of understanding your Enneagram type, and how that even plays into where your focus is, and where feel most impassioned to make commitments to help the planet and help humanity. And I really applaud you for all the great work you're doing, and for your wonderful rap songs at the end of your podcast.
Hey,
Those are brilliant.
hey, thank you. Can I add one thing that we talked about on the podcast,
Of course.
which we just released today? And one thing that you mentioned, which I thought was brilliant, I really appreciated it, was you said that you believe that we can take action and we can overcome this. And you believe that what it takes, because I expressed some doubt that the whole world could ever get together and do anything, because we haven't done that. A company can barely figure out what they want to do and get everybody on the same page. Certainly our country can't figure that out. So how can the world? But you said that when you have injustice, deep injustice, and when you have, and I'm forgetting the other piece,
Existential threat.
an existential threat. So when you have injustice and a threat, that is motivation to make change happen. And what's really interesting is I found a counter to what I had said about the world not coming together. My wife and I saw a movie last night. I think it was called 13 Lives. about the Thai soccer team that got lost in the caves and got stranded in the caves
Right.
for like over 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And in that movie, and I believe this really happened, thousands of people got together, and many of them from other countries. People just stopped caring about, their own specific needs. People gave up a lot to go there and to risk their lives by diving and going through these crazy caves and tunnels to rescue these children. And to me, that's an example of an injustice. Children dying, obviously that's a deep injustice
Yeah.
and an existential threat, maybe not to the world, but to their lives. And so the world did come together, and
Right.
everybody went to help. So I do think that you're right. And I think if you have those factors, we can make a difference. The whole world can come together and make a difference.
Right. And it's amazing the humanity's ability to empathize, because the people who went in to rescue them, they weren't in that situation, right? But they had this empathetic response to their plight, and it compelled them into action to help. And I think, as we move into more and more, urgent crises related to the climate, I think more and more people are going to have these types of empathetic reactions and want to help. And why it's so important, for them to hear your voice, because you've already gone through that. You've already had those feelings, and now you've found this role for yourself that is very productive and helping get the word out about possibilities to solve the climate crisis. And so, exactly, it really is. It's going to help all of us to have these empathetic, emotional reactions that bring us to the table in terms of solving the crisis.
And you also said on my podcast to listen to your emotions and listen to your passions and let your emotions drive you to follow your passions and help in the way that you can help and that you can make a difference,
Right.
because we're all different numbers
Right.
and we all have different ways. I might be a 7, but we need everybody in the game.
Right.
Everybody has something to give. And
Right.
in this movie, divers dove and other
Yeah.
people handled the logistics
Right.
and other people diverted the water from continuing to fill the caves. So different people had different knowledge and different capabilities, and that's how they contributed. So again, you are right on.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's going to take all of us, and we all have something to contribute. So, absolutely. Well, thank you, Lee, and thanks again for the great conversations and for sharing your feelings and your emotional journey that brought you to where you are today in your climate leadership. So, thanks again.
You're very welcome, and thank you.
Thanks for listening. I really appreciate how Lee describes how he cycles between being nervous and scared about what the science is telling us and being hopeful and optimistic about the amazing people he meets who are working on climate and the amazing solutions that are emerging. Also, Lee highlights the sense of enough. He felt like he had had enough and set out to focus on work that directly addresses the climate crisis. He has blended all his talents, his communication skills, his networking skills, his expertise in the energy sector, and of course, his rapping skills into a wonderful podcast, the Climate Champions podcast, where he can bring all of those talents together and get the message out about the great things that are happening to address the climate crisis. So if you found this helpful, please subscribe to the channel and click on the bell to get notifications of future episodes. Thanks again for listening.